we covered this, right? And this, and I know some of you have some questions, but we will take them towards the end of the class, right? If you can all remember, we touch upon, like I kind of went through my process where I encrypted something. As part of that implementation step, I encrypted text in like an encrypted box and all of that, trying to satisfy one of those control around SC28, right? And by doing that, it means we have already implemented the security control. But when you look at the landscape and how things are done, does that mean we are done? Absolutely not. Like even on the screen, you can see that we have 3 more steps to get into that, right? But additionally, there is always a need to have auditors, assessors, some third party kind of look into how things are done, right? So the person who implemented everything should not be the person basically assessing the environment or authorizing it as well, right? So you find there are multiple instances and approach to that, and I will just throw some examples here. So if you basically implement the system as a dev, if it's just within the organization, it doesn't include any outside entity whatsoever. It's possible like there could be a unit within your organization, maybe within the CISO's office or within the legal or even within the audit section, to kind of look into how the implementation is, and then that is part of their assessment, right? There are documentations out there on how to do certain assessment depending on the technology, but there's also a generic documentation provided by NIST on how to do that, and we will look into it. Now, once the assessment is done, right, the assessor will give a recommendation to whoever is going to authorize the system. In our situation, it will be the AO, right, the authorizing official. The assessor will submit a recommendation using what we call a SAR. And by the way, don't worry about these. Then for now, we will kind of get our hands into it. The assessor will submit a recommendation within the SAR to either approve, to recommend whether the system should be authorized or not. Now, the assessor is going to look at each single control that is implemented over here during the implementation based on those many controls. If your system is at moderate or at high, maybe the entire 448 controls, if you're looking at it from like say NIST high controls, or even the low based on what we saw like 100 plus, right? The assessor will look at each single control and then approve that control as yes, this control is in compliance or it is not. Those controls that were failed, like that they are not in compliance, they will go into what we call a poem, right? And that will be, we will discuss how to handle that. Okay. Based on then they will submit the recommendation whether the system should be authorized or not. And after it's been authorized, then there will have to be a continuous monitoring. And we will touch on that, all of that today. Okay. So let's get to the slide that goes into the assessment phase and just quickly cover the theoretical side. And then we will do an assessment based on the encryption, the file I encrypted as well, right? Keep in mind, the person, I know in this class, I'm having you do the assessment for what you did. Please don't go back to like your job and say, yeah, if you implemented, you have to be the one to do the assessment. Absolutely not. The only reason why I'm having you do your assessment here is because of 2 things. One, I still like, in addition to getting the other side, I want you to kind of understand the assessment process, okay? And there's no better way for you to understand the assessment process other than you doing it. But then the second thing, the most ideal situation in this class will have been to have you kind of switch positions where you take another colleague, one of the colleagues in the class, you take their package and kind of do the assessment. But we are not going to do that because of 2 things. People are in different stages in this class, and I kind of found it to be super time consuming, as well as there is a need for providing clarity, and then you start getting into you have to kind of study a lot about what the other student did, how did they do it, and then it becomes time consuming. And with Thanksgiving and December, everybody is slowly getting into that holiday and downtime period. I don't think it's the most uh, viable way of doing it. Okay, high level, you would hear of the word 3PAO, you will hear of assessor, you will hear of auditors, right? These are all names that are interchangeable. 3PO is a third-party assessor, someone from external to your organization. Assessor could also be external or internal. When you, if you can remember from what we covered around those parts in the ISACA book. And then you will hear the word auditor. A lot of people confuse the word assessor and auditors, and they make it interchangeable, but they are not meant to be interchangeable. Assessors, they tend to provide recommendation on how to, one, remediate a control. So if they have a finding, they provide remediation, and they also provide recommendation on authorization, right? Auditors do not do the second thing. They don't provide authorization for, sorry, they do not provide recommendation on whether something should be authorized or not. Now, don't get married to my statement here about, oh no, whenever I hear auditors, no, because the industry, it has just been made to be so interchangeable. So absolutely, absolutely, if someone says the word auditor, but they are meaning assessors, just take it, because um, I am seeing it more from that educational and theoretical part. So I figured it's good to share. But yeah, auditors do not necessarily some auditors do not even provide a recommendation whatsoever. They just check to see if you are doing it right or wrong. And then that's it. They just tell you, yeah, you're good or you're not. Now, lately there is a lot of, like, you see auditors providing a recommendation on how to fix something, but they don't necessarily provide recommendation on authorization. And I'll give you an example, like the GAO office, right? The General Audit Office, that is basically the US Gov. Auditors, they don't only focus on NIST, absolutely not, or I will say even FISMA compliance. That's not their only focus. They focus entirely from monetary, budgeting, all of those aspects, right? So they were the head of that auditors, and they look at things from a general landscape, and they provide more on recommendations on specific remediation approach, not necessarily authorization, because there is nothing to authorize, right? So they don't come in before the funding, but rather after an agency um, sec, a department secretary or whatsoever has finished with the spending, then they come in and look at the expenses, right? So that's another thing with auditors. So it depends at which stage. And you will hear more on like the cyber side of things. You will hear more of assessors than you would hear auditors, but they are interchangeable. Another key difference is when it comes to the naming convention or terminologies, assessors is more commonly used pre-authorization. Once the system has been authorized and it's just going through its continuous monitoring cycle, there is also the pre-assessment or reassessment or whatsoever, but also you will hear the word auditors. Just putting it out there, careful with that on how the words are being used. By the way, there are also those that do not even use the word assessor or auditors. Some use validators, right? Like you go to, say, a place like Navy, they have the Navy qualified validators where you have to actually be certified to become a validator, which basically does a similar job as the assessor does. Is there anyone who kind of knows about the Navy way of things here? Anybody with that DoD background that knows the Navy? Because Navy is the only one within DoD that have the NQVs. If anyone knows, please share. All right. So yeah, there is that Navy NQVs, and I think there is also a way of uh, becoming a qualified validator. It should be out there. Never really looked into it. Especially also now with like CMMC, there is a way, and they are using the word, I believe, auditors. So CMMC auditors, which is more in line with that NIST 800-171 controls. So it's all out there. You'll keep seeing the name interchangeable. Just kind of know that, focus more on what the role is trying to achieve, not necessarily what the role is being called, right? Okay, so how do you assess a system based on how it's implemented? Many ways, depending on what you actually implement in your step 3, right? And a lot of factors. What technology did you use, right? What tech was used? There are many technologies out there that do the same thing, right? If you are to build a website, there are multiple technologies you can use, at least beyond the basics, HTML, CSS. Like there are also other packages that you can basically leverage using Hero methodology or whatsoever, all of those different web development kind of way of doing things. So it depends. If you have a firewall, which kind of firewall is it? Is it a Palo Alto device? Is it a Cisco? Is it the same way of doing the assessment? Maybe not. Now, those technical things you would identify, and that is when having those skill set, especially specific to a certain industry or whatsoever, will come into the picture. If one is leveraging, say, Agile cloud environment, you will find how they're assessing controls implementations in Agile is a bit different with AWS, right? All of those things. But, and I'm saying but, is NIST did a good job on what you should be looking for when you're doing assessment. Now, I'm going to repeat this. There is a clear difference with what you are looking for during an assessment and how you are doing an assessment. NIST does not provide a how to do an assessment because it's truly technology specific, right? Or it depends. I keep saying it, but it is. The way you're going to assess AWS, as I mentioned, completely differs with how you're going to do assessment in Azure. But what to look for can be the same, right? So if you are looking for password parameters in AWS, that's the same thing you're looking for, password parameters in, say, Azure environment, right? Let's say AD, for example. So NIST kind of, can everybody please go on mute? NIST compiled, NIST put together a list of what to look for relating to those kind of controls, right? And everything, if you're doing an assessment. So I'm trying to make sure I remove this laser pointer. To, how do I remove this? Okay, great. So I can open this NIST special publication 800-53A. This is the document from NIST, and you can also look it up online. When you go down there, you will find that each single control that is within the list of controls within the NIST 800-53 has kind of a guidance on what to look for when, I think I put the wrong link. I'm seeing it opening -39. So please, for those of you with the slide, definitely that's not what you should look for, okay? We are trying to get to NIST 800-53A, not the, yeah, this is the document that we are looking for. Still a revision 4, but I don't know if they will release their F5 version anytime soon. So let's take a look at, say, the beginning part, all right? If you go into, like, these are all of it, basically. Just a second, great. So if you go into, say, if you implement, let's say, AC2, for example, this document does a very good job of telling you what you see. It started like the assessment objective, determine if the organization, if it does this, the purpose, the scope, all of those things, kind of it details it, and it's very granular. There is a reason for that. The NIST 800-53 controls are more around do this or ensure the system does this. An example is ensure that the system encrypts data at rest. That's it. So many ways of implementing that, and you've seen it. The way I did, like mine was with VeraCrypt, but we were talking about maybe achieving that using different other tools. Now, that's way too generic. Now, the assessment procedure, why it's broken down in detail, is because it looks at it from an actionable task. what are those actions that need to take place during the assessment? And that's how it looks at it, right? And also it comes from this DoD background of what we call CCIs. Not trying to confuse you here, but there's something we call the DoD CCIs where each single control, DoD does not necessarily see it as, they have started looking at it from controls perspective, but it's usually presented as a CCI where it's looking at a single control, like say AC2 alone could have maybe 5 action items that need to happen, right? As such, you would find like DoD is breaking those action items into a single kind of control in itself by tagging it with those CCIs. We call them the control something identifier. Have to look that up. To give you an example of that is, if someone says, if the control states like two-factor or multi-factor authenticator must be in place, when it comes to implementation, you know that you will not be able to implement, say, multi-factor authenticator without having another kind of parameter authenticator initially, right? So it requires 2 action items, but the control is just telling you just do this, which is a single control. So let's see, how can we achieve that? Maybe you will configure your username and password, that is one, and then you will have to now configure maybe via text message using Google Authenticator, using maybe Microsoft Authenticator, or the different types of multi-factor authenticator. It could also be your thumbprint or your face kind of thing on iPhone, right? Those are the multi-factor mechanisms. So when you look at it from an action items, how many steps did you need to take? Do you have to take before you're able to meet that control? We can say 2 or 3. One being like you have to set a username, second you have to set a password, and then third, you might have to kind of configure that authentication mechanism. But the control will just say, ensure the system have a multi-factor authenticator. Now, what this document does is it breaks it down into look into the system and ensure there is a username, then look into the system to ensure that there is a password, and then also ensure that there is an authenticator mechanism. So you'll see it so broken down. Now, also, it talks about what you should examine. So like for this control, that's AC1. Let me just go down to AC2, trying to look for something a bit technical. So it's saying like, you should look into the access control policy, what is the account management procedure, all of those things to ensure like that's how everything is in place, right? And then you can interview organizational personnel with account management responsibility. So it could be the sysadmins, all of those things, right? The system and network administrators. So if you're trying to be an assessor, so let's say FISMA assessor, definitely use this document because it's what's going to tell you how to assess AC2, right? Then also, if you're now going to test it, how should you do it? It's going to give you some guidance. So on my part, I know that I did SC28. That's what I implemented in this class. So let's see if we can go down all the way to SC. This is one thing I do not like about these documents. They are all in PDF and navigating is quite a challenge sometimes. But give me a second. Let me see if I can get down to all of those SC controls and we'll see what we need to do to kind of test to assess SC28, right?
Professor, if I could just mention something, because
Yes, please.
just a few weeks ago, I was editing 853A myself, the Rev 5. And, you know, if you got the right version of Adobe, that is Adobe Acrobat, you
Yes.
can actually excise you can excerpt the portion of the document you want, because, you know, as you know, this is a huge document, and
Yeah.
that way it becomes easier to manipulate because it's just a smaller document. And I was able to do that for the physical and environmental controls.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Absolutely. I do have the Adobe Pro. Actually, I have all of these line item already on my GitHub in granular detail of like how to do that. So I will toss that um, thing you shared with me. Thank you so much for that. But I'll also tell you, if you want to have them the granular assessment process where you don't have to be consuming this, just I have them on my GitHub and you can copy them. I think they are in Markdown, but yeah. So, but yeah, thank you so much. Um, so you see with SC8, we're looking for the protection of information at rest, right? What do we need to look into? Determine if the organization have defined all of this. This is more around that policy side of looking if the organization have defined what kind of encryption algorithm. I know on our part we use AES 256, so this will be more around that. So absolutely look into that. Second, now you're going to see if the organization information actually requires cryptographic protection. Let's say there's some personal information, PIIs, PHI, or whatsoever, right? You have to look into that as an assessor. You can see that we are not only looking at the technical implementation, but we are also looking at should the data actually be encrypted? All of those things, right? Now, it's also talking about examine system and communication protection policy. What are the policies to implement that? How the procedure and all of those. Interview these people, and then also test the cryptographic mechanism implementing confidentiality and integrity protection for information at rest, which we are going to do right now. We are going to test my kind of encrypted box, but we are not necessarily going to test the cryptographic mechanism. So we are not going to say we are testing AES 256 to see if it is credible enough, or if the encryption algorithm strength is meant to do that. One, because I'm not a mathematician and I do not work for NSA. Two, because I'm not a cryptographer. And three, because that is why we have the FIPS 200. So FIPS will validate and say these are the approved encryption algorithm that the US government has kind of tested and say like, go for it, right? So as such, we're not gonna do that. Okay. But yeah, those are around that. And if there is some sort of like offline storage beyond the encryption as well. So is it in a thumb drive? Make sure like we define information to be removed from online storage and stored offline in a secure location beyond those, because it's all part of protecting information at rest, right? Beyond the encryption algorithm as well. So you have to kind of test these, all of these three, right? So we are going to do that. Now, I do want to mention one thing real quick around, there are many requirements when it comes to doing assessment. Actually going back into here, there is one requirement that is RA5. RA5 is part of that the vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability definition is quite, I mean, we all know what the definition is based on our previous classes, right? But there are many ways of doing either a penetration test, many types of tests that we can do. Are you looking for the sticks implementation? Are you looking for actually infrastructure vulnerabilities? Are you looking for web application vulnerabilities? And there are different tools that meant to achieve that. You pick one like say Nessus, and Nessus is meant to, sorry, I'm trying to see if I can get RA5. And okay, great. Where is RA5? Can you take me there? Great. So you can see we have one control that is vulnerability scanning, and there are all of these requests within it, right? And running a Nessus scan in itself and Nessus scan coming back with the result is all to satisfy just this one control. You can run a network scan, infrastructure scan, web application scan, code scanning. There are those kind of code scanning around like dynamic, is it the DAST and SAST kind of scannings, or rather test, many different type of tests depending on what you're trying to achieve. Stress testing, right? First testing, all of those, they are all part of vulnerability scanning. Now I can tell you, I have seen a lot of places just go in there and just run an Nessus scan and then use the Nessus scan as their POAM, the outcome from the Nessus scan. Well, that is not like it is incorrect, but what a lot of people are forgetting is that Nessus scan is only meant to satisfy RA5, even though some aspect of Nessus scan for additional controls beyond this. Like when you run an OWASP related top 10 scan, even though it's meant to be a vulnerability scanning, but it's also look at the SI controls. So it's on you as the assessor to make sure that you are differentiating that. Okay. Uh,
Professor, I have a question.
yes, please go for
And,
it.
and of course, the commercial instantiation of Nessus, well, one of the big ones is Tenable,
Okay.
and which, I've used extensively for assessing systems for, software vulnerabilities, faults and that sort of thing. But I think, aren't you here suggesting that it's used for something other than that, that it's actually that can be used for seeing whether or not certain features may be disabled, say in an operating system, that harden it up?
No, not really. That's not what I'm trying to say. Let
Okay.
me show something here. Okay. When you're doing an assessment for FISMA assessment, you are looking at individual controls. So you are looking at, like, say, give me just a second to kind of hit my pen. Okay, so you're looking at the controls, like, is AC1 in place? Is AC2 in place? Is RA5 in place? Right? Is like SC28 in place, the one that I just implemented, all of those. That is the assessment that you're doing for FISMA. However, RA5 in itself is a requirement for you to do a vulnerability scan, right? When you look at, like, when you run a vulnerability scan, you will have many. And by many, I mean sometimes you can even have 1,000 reports. Actually, no, not report, like 1,000 items you are looking into, right? Vulnerability related. It could be looking at the different line of codes. Let's use Nessus, for example. That's the Tenable you're talking about, right? Tenable Nessus. It could be looking for, do we have those TLS certificates in place, right? Are we using DoD related certificates when you're talking about stakes? All of these, right? Now let's say Nessus comes back with 100 items as failed, right? What I'm saying is you find a lot of agencies, they will take the result of this 100 for Nessus and say it is the assessment result for FISMA, which it is not, because this 100 failed items are only related to RA5. Now, granted, within these 100 items, don't be surprised to see that one of them is like, yeah, your system does not have a password, which is related to, say, AC2, but it doesn't translate as this findings is the only FISMA assessment. Because when you look at it, like, Nessus does not look at physical controls. It will Nessus will not tell you if you have a security guard or not, right? That is more related to here around those PS controls. So if you take only these to go into your poem, how do you track these PS controls, the managerial controls and operational controls? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Let's cycle back on that then after we end it. We kind of finish the process, okay? So that's part of the assessment process around, like, scannings, but then also there is the documentation review, just like we saw it in the NIST 800-50 that dash 53A. It says, like, you should review this and whatsoever. We also have the demo, right, where it's more on that technical, like I'm saying, show me this, right? As the assessor, either I have a direct access, which hardly know, or I'm sitting maybe and saying, like, show me that you have done this, right? There are also, like, other type of tests around, like, say, or exercises around tabletop and all of those that are more related to incident response and contingency plannings. But yeah, many methodologies, right? That's the part. We will have the class activity, but we will talk about it in a much later. So now that we are, say, done with the assessment, right? We have an assessor have done the assessment. What happens next? At a very high level, more could go, but there is something we call a poem, and there's what we call a SAR, right? A poem. It's plan of action and milestone. The SAR is the security assessment report, which is reporting the assessment result. Okay. Um, assessment results, right? And the poem is looking at, out of the assessment, what is failed, right? What is wrong? And the the assessor will definitely work with whoever implements it or whatsoever and come up with a plan on how to resolve these failed controls. Okay, based on that, let's say the system implemented 100 controls, right? There are 100 controls that were implemented within the system. And let's say 20 of them were failed. I'm not saying it's based on numbers, but let's just say 20 were failed. And out of those 20, the assessor and whoever implemented will have an agreement like, okay, this is how we are going to resolve it and whatsoever, or we'll even resolve it before the recommendation is given out and all, but it will be tracked into this poem, right? And don't be surprised, some actually also will also include the 80 that were passed into the poem, but they will call it that part of, ideally you shouldn't, because the 80 that were initially passed, they are not considered closed poems. No, the 20 that were originally failed, and then you are able to fix 5 of those, these 5 becomes what we call a closed poem, and then the open poems will be the remaining 15, not the original 80 that were kind of that were passed initially, right? But, and I'm saying but, don't be surprised to go to a certain agency and this is their approach. Just take it. Just truthfully take it. The minute you try to change the things and whatsoever, good luck trying to change these agencies. And I'm not saying that it's the right or wrong way. It is just so more on that making that decision of, is it worth it to really drill? Because adding this into the poem doesn't necessarily becomes a bad thing. Actually, sometimes it's even good when you look at it from the poem being a risk register, since you are trying to track everything, right? Now, after the poem, a SAW is submitted to the authorizing official. Now, the SAW is going to be submitted as part of what we call an ATO package, right? And that's when we will get into here. The SAW will contain, sorry, going back, the SAW will also provide a recommendation by the assessor on whether to approve the system that is authorized or not. That decision will come due to many factors. Don't be surprised you have implemented 100 controls and you passed 99 and you fail only one, and this one control is what is going to deny you the ATO. Why? Because it is a high risk, right? It is a high risk. And it is also possible to implement 100 controls and basically I will say pass 20 and fail 80, but all the ones that were failed are really low related controls, right? As such, you can still get a recommendation to like you can still get the system authorized, right? And then begin working on those poem, even though a lot of them don't really do it. Someone cracked a joke in this class, but yeah. So based on that, the SAW will get, that is the authorization kind of thing, right? These documentations will be submitted ideally to the AO, but they will not read it. I'm just letting you know, right? The ISSO should make sure everything is in line and whatsoever, and there is this one of those. The ATO memo will get submitted to the assessor. Now, sorry, to the authorizing official, and based on those recommendations whatsoever, they will approve the system or not. Now, there are different types of authorization. Let's look at the first one, interim authority to test. And I will give you some couple of examples. Let's say you have system A here that has been running for ages. It has already achieved its ATO, it's good, it's whatsoever, it's in production, it's working, right? But you as a security, like you as a developer or engineer, or maybe your consulting firm got awarded some government contract and you stood up another system here, system B, which is brand new. But system B is meant to connect with this. If you can remember, from the ISAC, from the first part of the class, we talk about a system development lifecycle, right? As the development lifecycle around having development environment, then you will have some form of a testing environment, some will have a staging before the system goes into production, meaning go live. We talk about that. Now, when you look at this, if this system has not already been approved and it needs to connect with this, connecting it without authorizing this system B, one could say there is a risk, right? Because you're introducing unknown system that has not been tested into A. Why would you do that? But but then at the same time, you might need to connect with it to ensure that this system, that is the B system, is functional as it is designed to, because it's meant to connect with A. So how do you achieve that? That is what we call, when you will, because you want to test that, you will request for an IATT, that is an interim authority to test. So system A here, that has already been authorized, system B here, instead of doing a full authorization for this, you will authorize at least, at a minimum, the minimum security requirements that is needed to connect with A. Once this system gets a check on those, maybe not the full-blown, obviously it's not a full-blown ATO, but just some minimum security implementational requirements must be in place before the system is allowed to do that. Getting those in place and approving it is what it means to your system has an IATT. So you have achieved an interim authority to test. That means you can connect A to B to be able to test this system to see if your implementations and the objectives of system B are in place, right? Another form of authorization is the ATO, which is what we are doing here, right? These are system owned and operated internally. Why do we say internally? Because for a system to achieve ATO, the person who needs to authorize it, if we look at it from agency-wise, the AO is going to be in the same organization. Like the AO must come from the same organization as the system, right? And I know some of you will say, no, 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 no. What about FedRAM? What about whatsoever? Again, we are talking about internal systems like this. When you look at FedRAM and AWS, FedRAM do not say AWS, sorry, FedRAM do not assess AWS. A third-party assessor like Cofire will be the one to do it. Once Cofire's assessment is in place, they will then submit a recommendation to a place like FedRAM, and FedRAM will be the one to authorize AWS, right? So in such situation, FedRAM's authorization is not on Amazon. They are not authorizing Amazon for Amazon use, but rather they are authorizing Amazon for government use, meaning whatever it is, FedRAM is the AO for government usage. That's how it relates to this, internal. Again, in this case, you're looking at the government entirely as a single entity, right? Now, based on that, that is achieving an ATO. Now, authority to use on a different side, I'm trying to get my pen back. Where is it? So that's an ATO. Basically what we're trying to achieve here. You will hear of another one, ATU, that is authority to use. This is most times when the system is not owned or procured or something like that by the organization. You will find ATU mostly on SaaS products. Let's say Dropbox or Box or Google Drive or OneDrive or I'm trying to SharePoint or Word document like Microsoft Word, or all of these things that you can just pay a license, like you can just pay a subscription and use it, Netflix, whatsoever. If the government tomorrow decides that, okay, we're going to start using Netflix and be paying for the monthly subscription, the government is not going to ATO it because it's already operational. And the government is not going to do anything other than just paying to use it. As such, what is usually issued is what we call an ATU. But again, keep in mind, we are in class and we are just looking so much on the theoretical side. please, when you go into an agency and you see them paying like they are paying for some service, let's say maybe bucks, since it's authorized to be used within the government sector, maybe bucks, or they're even maybe paying for Office 365, right? Or rather Microsoft 365, where they are not deploying anything, they are just consuming it. But they are saying like, yeah, we need to issue an ATO. Theoretically, it means ATU, but it's not a problem if it's being called an ATO, okay? Again, it depends on where it is. Just trying to highlight this. Again, there could be other type of authorizations depending on the organization. Um, we have another within DoD, the ATP. I'm trying to remember what the P is, especially around PIT systems. Uh, yeah, but there is another one within DoD called ATP, and just you can ask what the different type of authorization means. Ultimately, keep in mind that it is just getting whatever it is to be authorized, right? Great. Um, these are different types of documentations. The ones I highlighted in green are the ones related to this class. The ones in black, we're not gonna touch it, but they are all different types of documentations that you need to put in place. Okay.
Professor, I do have a question on that complete
Okay.
list, and that is, in order to reach the point, the milestone of having the authority to operate, do you have to have all 19 documents or just the 7?
So, good question. One, these are not exhaustive lists. Okay. Uh-oh, what's going on? Give me a second. All right. These are not exhaustive lists. Do not be surprised to see additional lists come out of the organization and say like, yeah, we need these additional kind of document as number 2021. Also, there is no defined requirement on what needs to be in place. Again, it depends. One, it depends on what the organization is looking into. Another, it depends on how the system that you're authorizing is related to. Let me give you an example. If your system has nothing to do with PHI, PII, any privacy related, then it absolutely doesn't really make sense to have a privacy documentation like privacy threshold analysis and privacy impact analysis in place because it does not apply. If your system does not connect whatsoever with any external system or any system that is not any unauthorized system or maybe owned by a third party or someone outside your business unit, you might not need to have an interconnection security agreement, right? If your system, maybe you are not like the assessment, well, every system must have an assessment, but let's say you're doing an assessment just internally, you have a rules of engagement ideally. So yeah, I wouldn't use that as an example, but trying to see which one might not apply here. Those are the ones I can think of. Oh, by the way, O&M documents, the operations and maintenance, don't be surprised if it's all included within this information security continuous monitoring, because that's the way it's done now, not the old O&M. What next? BIA, like business impact analysis. If your system is not a major system, it's coming under another major system, then don't be surprised to see like you don't need to document a BIA because it's already under a general system. So a lot of them, if your system is not collecting any records whatsoever, then chances are you don't need to have a SON, right? Incident response plan, I will highly recommend that. It's highly unlikely you don't see it, but it's also possible if your system is like not a general, if your system is not a general system and there is already an existing system that is considered a major system with authorization and it already has its IRP, CMP, CP, trying to see which one again you can inherit, maybe RA as well, then you can just all have this. So it depends, honestly.
So, Dr. Waziri, Jacob here, a quick question. In
Oh.
your scenario where you were pursuing an ATO for a system and it needed to connect to system B, and that had an IATT,
Mhm.
We have to include that IATT in this ATO package?
Good question. Absolutely, absolutely great question. The IATT in itself will have some of these documents, right? The IATT is not just a single thing. Just like the ATO package, there is an IATT package. And the organization might say, we need to have the SSP with these minimal controls, maybe a little bit of, you might not need a poem for an IATT, but you might need something like, not necessarily continuous monitoring plan. You will definitely need a FIPS 199 documentation, like your security controls tailoring, and all of those things. And then instead of having an ATO memo, you will have an IATT memo, right? So that is your IATT package. Now, once you get the IATT in place, do you need to resubmit them to get ATO? I've been doing this for some time, and I think I've authorized systems more than 20. I've gone through the process like, I don't know how many times, but I've never seen a situation where you need to put in the whole IATT package into this package, because they are also this. Like the IATT package will have an SSP, but the ATO package SSP will be more rich and up to date than the IATT. However, don't be surprised that you will have to put IATT memo that was signed into this existing package. So it will go as number 20 as IATT memo, and just for retention. Does that answer your question?
Dr. Wasiri,
It does. Yep.
this is Stephanie. So you said that the IATT memo signed. Who is it that signs the memo or the documents?
The AO will
Oh,
also sign the memo.
okay. He signs up. So the AO signs off on everything then.
Yeah, the AO signs off on all the memos, because the memo is like the one pager that authorizes the system. But these documents, depending at the different stages, you will see like different people authorizing it. Like the SSP will have like the system owner signature, the ISSO, maybe sometimes the AO, hardly. But like you will see like the FIPS 199 might only have, say, the ISSO be the signatory. The SAW will definitely have the assessor signature in there, as well as whoever, maybe the ISSO, right? So it depends.
So another thing, like is there like a process that you have to go through, like a control gate or milestone where, like somebody reviews these documents and gives approval?
This is a very good question. You guys are really, really asking great questions today. Not like you don't usually do it every day, but these questions are good. Every organization, you will find them that they have documentations. Like, I'll give you some examples. Maybe they always tend to end up with a handbook, right? You will find like maybe information security handbook for the organization, or maybe ATO handbook, right? Or their process handbook. The thing is, when FISMA got down, and then NIST kind of NIST was assigned as the institution to really kind of provide all of these guidelines on whatsoever and the process, they passed on the responsibility of defining the process of getting an ATO to different organizations. Because of that, there is no uniform process. Every organization handles it different. Now, let me give you a certain quick thing, because actually this is good. By the way, if you all have some bandwidth, feel free to go look into it. You might not find the most up-to-date, but the older versions could be out there. Give me any agency, honestly, any agency. Let's just use the DoD generic ATO process guide, right? So let me just put a PDF.
How about DHS?
DHS. Because I'm a recording, I'm just gonna keep quiet about some comments. Let's look at the DHS RMF ATO process, right? Like a lot of them, they will have like a guide, and you see security authorization process for the DHS. I don't know if this is up to date. Hardly do you find the most recent. They usually put the old, yes. So this is like since 2015, but you see, this is the security authorization process guide, and it will list out what needs to be done. You see, they call the assessor is called the SCA over here, right? It will basically details out It might not be visual, but it will detail out the different responsibilities of the CISO, the ISSM, all of those people. So you see the people that are involved, authorizing official, this review document. As you go through it, you will see what needs to happen. You see, these are the authorization team, the ISSO, disaster recovery team. Absolutely makes sense to have the disaster recovery team, especially around those contingency planning, the system owner, technical staff, the AO. The AO could be the CISO as well, or it could not be, right? So each
Did you put the URL for that document in the chat window?
just Google it, I guess, because I just found it on Google by just DHS RMF ATO process. I will tell you this. Do not just go and Google this document and use it as the only way to achieve ATO. No, every organization have their own process. If I literally change this from DHS to say HHS, you see, this is the HHS process probably. Let's see.
So really, we just have to follow whatever, like whichever agency we're performing these for, we have to follow whatever their process is.
Yep, absolutely. You have to follow. Every agency should have one, right? Like I'm trying to see on the CMS if they have one. Yeah. So you see there's risk management handbook. Is this the handbook? Yes, the handbook. So it will detail out their own process. This is for CMS. CMS is a subset of HHS, right? The Center for Medical Care. So this will not be the entire HHS, but I'm trying to see if some of them will also tell you the documentations that are required to achieve the ATO, right? System security plan. Some will list out the different documentations on how to do that. I'm trying to see which, okay, points of contact should include the following: ISSO contractor support, whatsoever. So it depends, honestly. And it kind of makes sense because every agency is has a different mission, right? Like you think of DHS is Homeland Security, HHS is health-related stuff. So maybe DHS will be focused more on those controls that apply to really national security, and then HHS might look a lot into health-related controls, right? So let me see if I can look for another organization. Let's see if there's maybe Army within DoD RMF ATO process, if there's anything like that. Authorizing official, this is just specific to that. PM cybersecurity, program management, cybersecurity. I don't know. What's this? But yeah, just these might all be outdated now. This looks like just some presentation by someone. Okay, I can't find anything for the DoD. Let me see, which agency again? Anyone? Just one, and then we'll take a break. Can you think of any? Or no? Yeah.
Sir, I think the Army one was like the second hit down if you go back on your search.
Sure. I just also this.
Army pose.
Yeah. Look at it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it will also be outdated. Hardly do you find them as up to date. Obviously, it's a security. What? I'm saying this.
No, that's their official pub site. It should be updated.
Is this?
It's 2019.
And 2019. Yeah. So it's out there. It's just a process. So you see, it's talking in detail whatsoever. I'm trying to see if there is like a visual kind of roadmap that details that. Okay. Summit. No, I don't know if this is it. No, this is just the governance hierarchy. Assess and authorize, and this is the big. So yeah, just you'll find some might not be the most up to date depending on the organization. Some, I mean, you can see the Army, theirs is unclassified and it's 2019 because it's just a process, right? Again, the process is not really the sensitive thing. It's just more so on the different type of controls and the type of implementation. I'm trying to see if they have identified what checklist of documentations need to go into their package at a minimum.
So Dr. Waziri, could it be, so like, if it's a agency, all of the systems may not have to have all the documents though, right? It might be dependent on like what the owner of the system wants or what?
That's why you will have those remember the planning meeting we had like the planning stage we had initially, which is a very good addition. That's when you all decide like, is the system, so keep in mind we are teaching this class at a very high level, but let me just touch on this. There are things we call a general system, right? Major system, minor system. Every organization will define what that is, right? General system could be a general support system. You'll see something like GSS system. Maybe it's something that applies to the entire organization wide. It could be the timesheet related system, right? Maybe it already had all of this, right? But then maybe there's another major system that is maybe also meant focus on satisfying a lot of things within the organization, and it will have also the same checklist. But then there could be a minor system, which is maybe just under the major system. We said the general system is a system focused on timesheet. Maybe the minor system, we are just standing it up as an addition to the GSS system so that we can transition the GSS from a timesheet only to a full HR system that also provide benefits, information, and whatsoever. As such, the minor system, authorizing it will be more of an addendum to the GSS system. So maybe we don't need to resubmit all of this, but rather just go into each one and kind of make some additions. Different ways.
So I know I'm asking a lot of questions tonight.
You're fine, go for it.
But one other question, have you ever done this for a system, like a new system? Because I know that like there are systems that you do it for, like that's already in existence, but have you ever done it from like all the way, like from project initiation all the way through like close out of the project?
That's the one I've done the most actually, especially around those things. Why is Cortana starting up? Yeah, but yeah, my career I've done more of new systems than I did an addition. Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Because I used to be a consultant. As consultants, you are doing more of projects. So projects are kind of short. You just go in, do it, get out, and then go into another one, at least on my part. So I did most of new systems. I'm sorry,
Doctor. We're trying to build some aircraft for the Army.
So in that case, let's take it offline. Sorry, I had to cut you short. I don't want to, we're recording the class for public consumption. I don't want to talk about your project related. I'll also do not think it is wise, whether it's sensitive or not, to just talk about it on the recorded space. So we can talk after the class. Again, just have some thoughts on it. If you can ask the question without really specifying what you are trying to achieve with that, I would rather we do that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Correct. Perfect. Thanks. Any other question on this?
Yeah, Dr. Waziri, going back to this IATT, that being an external dependency, is that holding up a specific thing in this list of 1 to 19, like, for example, interconnection security agreement? Could we, where I'm going with this is, if I'm trying to pursue ATO and I'm dependent on an external entity to do an IATT for me to complete my ATO, is there a specific thing here that I could forego, for example, and still get my ATO?
So I will talk on a general landscape here. One, I am not sure when you say you depend on an external entity to do an IATT, because IATT is just like getting an ATO. It's more so on the maturity state of the system, not necessarily who is doing it, right?
Well, I mean, isn't it an external system versus the system I'm doing an ATO for? Is it
No. It's for the system that you are trying to get an ATO for is what you get an IATT. It's just that you get an IATT before the system is ready for production, if you need to kind of say test the system in a production environment. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Let me
but in your example, you were showing that if I needed a system A, it needed to connect to a B, right? And for A to get ATO.
Let's do this. Let me give you a scenario. This is system A, right? Actually, let me do this. This is your organization, right? This is system A that is meant for timesheet. That's its job only. and we realize like, you know what, we have so many employees, health benefits whatsoever. We need to stand up another system that needs to kind of capture health benefits related stuff. But in order to be able to do that, actually not just health benefit, we just need to capture benefits and PTOs, for example, right? But in order to do that, we need to consume information from the timesheet to ensure like how many time people have put in, how many hours, whatsoever, to be able to determine that hours in PTO. But we don't have a system to do that, and this system A does not do it. So we agreed that we are going to stand system B to allow everybody get their PTO related information. Now, do you agree with me? Just high level. Let's not get into the technical stuff. But do you agree with me that it is possible for us to get to be able to provide PTO related information to someone here who already have access to this, for them to be able to see how many PTO days they have? We kind of need to do some calculation on based on at least say timesheet, like, yeah, how many hours do they have left, or maybe how many hours they worked, so we can calculate their PTO. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay,
This
so,
scenario, I'm okay with. Yep.
okay, so based on that, right, we need to connect this system B to system A. But system A has been in existence for maybe 5 years. It has already achieved its ATO. It has been reused, reauthorized, and all of those things. But system B, we just stood it up, literally brand new. But as we are building system B, before we allow all of these employees to be able to access it, there are just a handful of people that are the developers that need to make sure like, yeah, system B is going to work. How are they going to do that? They need to test it. How are they going to test it? They need to consume the data here. But the system has not been authorized for them to do it. Well, technically, the system cannot get authorized until it's been tested. But then how can the system get tested without it being authorized? Do you see? It's like a chicken and egg thing, right? And don't get me wrong, you will go through those challenges. Some will be like, yeah, we can give you an IATT because we can never allow you to test because the system is still not ready in a current state. And you're like, yeah, but I cannot really get it to the good state that you're asking me for until you allow me to test. So it's a chicken and egg thing, right? But do you understand what I mean by B is not authorized yet, but it needs to connect with A?
I got it this time. Yep.
Great. So in order to ensure that B can connect to A to test, but knowing that B cannot get a full ATO, because to get a full ATO, the system must be tested, and it's never been tested. We are trying to get it. That is when you get an IATT, Interim Authority to Test. When we get the IATT, it will have, like, for you to get that, it will have security requirements, like make sure the system does this, make sure the system does this at a minimum, right? So you do all of those things. The devs will have to implement all of those things, and then the system, sometimes it gets assessed, sometimes it doesn't. Ideally, it should be assessed, but then the AO, the same person that is eventually going to give an ATO, will now say like, okay, based on how you do it, the recommendation whatsoever, here is your assigned IATT. Most times it comes with like expiry date, just like the ATO, the generic expiry date is like 3 years. We are now switching to something called continuous authorization, but that's different. The IATT will come like, yeah, this IATT expires after 60 days or after 30 days or after 90 days. So finish all your testing before 30 days. If you're not done, maybe we can extend the IATT or we'll cancel it. Does that make sense, what an IATT is now?
It sure does. Yes, thank you.
Great. Yes, Rebecca, in this class, there is no IATT requirement. Any question on this? No? Okay, so now you have achieved your ATO. In this class, I have inked my name, Ibrahim Waziri Jr., signed it for you, like, yeah, you have an ATO. Is that the end? Absolutely not. What is next? You need to do this. That's when we get into monitoring. You need to constantly, continuously monitor your system. I can tell you, some will just do it the minimum. You know, there's just one person constantly looking at it. They will never pay full attention until it comes to like that after 3-year cycle that the ATO is about to expire. They are getting another reauthorization, then they will do it. But a good practice is to have a continuous monitoring. This is where you have tools like the same tools we were talking about, like Splunk, constantly looking into the different logs, logging in and all of those things, right? NIST provided a good guidance, a good guide as always. There is a guide for how to do continuous monitoring, which is this document, right? And you can review it if your goal is to get into that O&M kind of persona or job market, like you want to be that the ISCM role, right? That's like the information continuous security continuous monitoring person. You definitely review this. It provides some guidance on how to just do continuous monitoring. Again, NIST does not go in depth from a technical technology perspective. It's just kind of provide the process that you need to constantly go through as you do your I'm trying to get to, but yeah, great. So it provides that kind of ISCM, how you should apply it organization-wide, system-wide, or it depends, right? What exactly is it that you are monitoring? Most times, ideally, your system should join the organization-wide information security continuous monitoring process, right? It should continuously do that. And you can see automated manual data feeds, like example, the security related information on the POAM answer, because again, the POAM has the list of findings. Part of information security continuous monitoring is to continuously ensure like those findings are remediated and new findings are not available. But if they present themselves, you continuously optimize it to do what? Maintain the security posture of the system. What is the security posture of the system? That is the agreed security position of the system when it was authorized, including the agreements that were in place related to the POAM, right? So if you want to kind of understand this, please go through this document as well, okay? Let us take, what's the time? Wow, 7:59. So let's take 10 minutes, we come back and we are going to kind of go through it all over again from the assessment part, because I would like to do my own assessment and then I would like to discuss the class activities. I would like to discuss the expectations on your part from a class activity all the way starting from this step, the step 3, how you should go about it. Okay, can we take exactly 10 minutes, please? If anyone has a question, I'll be here. I'll be happy to chat, but Dave, feel free to please put it on pause, and thank you so much. Now we are done with monitoring, right? Let's look into one, assessing my system, right? And what do I expect from the class? And then we will talk about authorization and the other good things, right? Can everybody still see my screen? Oh, I'm not sharing. Let me see.
Yep, we can
see
see.
Screen.
You can see it.
Okay, can you see the encrypted box then?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So I believe everyone can remember this encrypted box that we created. We did that using VeraCrypt, right? We use VeraCrypt. Let me even go here. Hold on, let me just kind of split my screen into two.
Wait, Dr. Waziri, we did this in another class, another session, created the encrypted box?
Yeah,
Okay.
you should catch up on the last class recording.
Okay.
But just going back here, we kind of have this encrypted box where we created it. I'm going to select it again, just so we can mount it. Actually, let me do this first, so we can all see it as it's getting mounted, right? Give me a second. We can all see my C drive. That's the only drive I have. And yeah. So what we are going to do is we are going to mount this encrypted box. First, let me try to open it. Nothing in there, and I cannot open it. Great. We do have the password here based on last usage. Please tell me I saved that password. Oh yeah, great, I did. Okay, so I'm going to mount my encrypted volume to make sure we have it again, and then we are going to just do some basic assessment on it. Uh-oh, not here. Where is it? What am I looking for? Here. Encrypted box. Here. Mount. I need to select the volume. It's going to be drive A, mount it, and I'm going to put my password from the original one. Paste, display password, and okay. It should mount drive A here, which is like my little encrypted container that we did. Please tell me that that's the right password. Oh my God. Yep, that's it. So it was 10 megabytes, and this is it. We had Brian Moziri, PII in there at the time with this dummy data, right? If you can remember, this was it. So this is my environment. This is the implementation that I'm claiming we did and whatsoever. Now, how can we assess this? First, why don't we do one form of assessment that shows we cannot access, like we cannot mount this with the wrong password. So I'm going to dismount it. It's no longer there. And yep, yes, I'm going to force it. It's no longer mounted. I am going to try and mount it with the wrong password. This is the correct password here. And I'm going to remove just the last Z and, ignore it to see if that's part of assessment, right? Now, I'm going to still use drive letter A. The file is already selected, but if you can remember, just click on it. We have it under my desktop. That's where the file is. And I have it under here, encrypted box, open. And we are going to mount it. Keep in mind that let's show the password here, display password. And when we look at the original password, it ended with a character Z, but I'm removing that to kind of make it the wrong password, as you can see. So let's mount it. At least we should get an error, right? That's one. Let's see. It's gonna take some time, but after that, we are going to also try to do another assessment to see what kind of encryption algorithm are we using. During the time when we were selecting, we said we are good. Okay, great. So we have this. This is definitely an assessment to show that if we use the incorrect password, we cannot access this volume, right? That's one. Now I'm going to go back again, put those characters, all right? Display the password, and the one that is omitted is the letter Z. You can see BVXZ, and we do not have Z here, so I'm going to add it, Z, and mount it, right? It should show us as A, but now I also do want to see what is the encryption algorithm that we are using to encrypt this at rest, right? To achieve this, I would like to know some additional information. So here, A, what is the encryption algorithm? We should have something here that tells us, select file device, volume properties. Oh, look at it, encryption algorithm, but let's see the volume properties. Again, we are using the encryption algorithm as AES 256, that's the key size. It's like the same thing. This is the HMAC and share, that's around the hashing algorithms. If we have a requirement for that, we will definitely be able to show. Do we have any requirement around what the maximum size of the storage or the minimum size should be? That could be it. Should it be read-only? For now, we don't have it, but we do not have that as a requirement for SC28. If we have another requirement that says, well, after implementing this at rest, like after encrypting at rest, also make the volume to be read-only, then ideally this should show that, but that will be a different control that we need to implement, right? So all of this. Now, everything I did here to show it, if you are doing it, I want you to record it. How do you record it? You go figure it out. If you're on a Windows, I guess you can use the Xbox kind of thing, or your Zoom. Just do something that records your screen as you're doing this. Also, like previous classes, some have actually held on to kind of like their phone to record it. This entire process should not be more than 5 minutes. If it's taking you more than 5 minutes, then just assess a single control, then you haven't mastered it, then I would recommend like you do it on multiple occasions to know what exactly you need to do. And please keep it less than 5 minutes because I'm not looking for you to upload a huge video, but I will want you to record all of this. But we will discuss the in-depth requirement because I also want you to capture a screenshot. The recording is meant to be the demo. Ideally, if it were in a real environment, I will be sitting next to you. Like if it is real ATO, either I'm sitting next to you to kind of go through this process with you, or I'm doing something else, right? So this is the assessment process we are working on. Just a second, please, everyone. Give me a second and I will be right back, okay? Apologize for that. Sorry, everyone, I'm back. So yeah, this part, I will go over down the requirements with you on Canvas on what needs to be done here. However, there are other documentations that we need to complete related to this. Any questions specifically on this, or rather should we table it to after? Hello, can you hear me?
This makes sense.
Yes.
Short
Okay.
short video and then a screenshot.
Yep, by the way, we will go into Canvas in detail to discuss that. Now, there are specific documents that needs to be completed. So I'm going to just open them and kind of just go through them, right? Like a poem and the rest of the documents. Give me a second, trying to open those. Okay, so we have done the implementations, assign a poem, ATO memo, this, and also this. So give me a second and we will go over them together, okay? So we have talked about poems in the class that shows kind of those vulnerabilities and the current status of a system. This is what a poem looks like. This is based on the FedRAM template. Do not be surprised to see it different ways, okay? There will be a unique ID, come up with yours. That unique ID could be maybe AC2 or something like that, right? I just added the V because most times you find V added as a vulnerability. But before we even get into that, what is my system name? Marymount, can someone remind me, please? What is my system name? Anybody? Marymount.
Learning management system.
Yep, that's true. But let's write it in full, right? Marymount learning management system. My impact level was high. Let's use today's date as the poem date. Don't be surprised to see additional information related to this. Okay. Uh-oh, what am I doing? Let's do this then. 02 November 2020. This is interesting. Why is the date? Oh, okay. I'm not sure what's going on. It's only showing the date, the time here, not the date. Okay. Seems like it's there. Wow. All right. I don't have the time for this, but yeah, the date, right? So over here, we'll put this. What's the control number? Well, technically mine didn't fail, so, but let's consider it. So that's the control ID. Name the weakness, maybe password. Sorry, name of the weakness provided by the scanner, or otherwise summarizing the summary, summarizing the weakness. We did not use any scanner. It's more so around, let's assume that my encryption algorithm was kind of not the one that was approved, right? So it's not AES 256, maybe we are using DES, which is also another symmetric algorithm that could be used to achieve that, but it's no longer relevant, right? So we can say MLMS uses DES algorithm. This is just me giving a high level. Actually, it's the name, not the description. So for the name, I will just call the weakness name as incorrect algorithm. I'm just making this up, and I don't mind if you make yours up as well, right? And the description is maybe MLMS uses DES algorithm instead of AES. This is just high level, doesn't make sense in terms of the amount of information, but we'll go with it. Weakness detector source, is there a tool? These are all different tools, but maybe it's just coming from the security assessment report that we did, which we'll touch upon, right? What's the weakness identifier? Is there additional identifier related to it? Yeah, maybe we have like, let's just say AC28. This is more on the control ID, but I will just add maybe some characters or even call it -1A, just an identifier. If you're using a tool, it should be populated. Asset identifier, specified identifier space. So is there any IP related to this or whatsoever? For me, I will say none right now, but you should. Who is responsible for implementing this task? I was responsible for implementing the task, right? Required resources, what do we need to do to achieve that? Maybe we need to procure encryption tool that supports AES 256 deployment, right? Because the tool we are using maybe doesn't support AES, right? Hold on just a second. Okay, date the first weakness was identified, maybe it was, let's see today, right? November 02, 2020. Oh wow, what is the validation over here? How do you want me to put the date? Come on, spreadsheet. Okay, when is the completion date? Maybe we'll be able to achieve that by next week. So I'll put that. Again, remember that is why it is a plan of action and milestones, right? So this is the date we are going to work towards solving the problem, right? Planned milestone, permanent column, list of proposed milestone, whatsoever, any whatsoever. So above milestones, right? We are going to begin identifying what are we going to do to achieve this. First is we are going to procure the tool. Second is we are going to install it within the organization. Third, we are going to now deploy it and test it and make sure it's going to be used. Then we are going to basically remediate this finding, right? So we will all itemize all of those milestones that we need to hit before we get there. Status date. Date poem item was last changed or closed. It's still open, but we just updated it because we have achieved certain. Actually, you know what? Why don't I do this? Maybe one of the milestone is procure tool from vendor, and we'll identify the vendor. Don't ask me why is it color coded, because these templates are all coming from kind of like FedRAM, so need to spend some time into understanding the template itself. After we do that, maybe we need to deploy the tool, and then maybe we also, what's going on? Also, the next milestone will be to Install the tool, right? Well, that would be more of like deployment. Then test the
Dr.
tool.
Marziri, this is Stephanie. Can I ask you a question?
Let's go for it.
Do you guys use this spreadsheet to kind of track these poems? You don't have like an automated tool or something that kind of
Good question. There are a lot of automation initiatives going on, but yeah, you'll be surprised how people are doing poems, depending on the organization, depending on the funding, depending on how they see the importance of ATO. I don't do ATOs anymore, but I am working on creating a tool that will help automate this. But there are other ones out there that allows you. EMAS is one. It doesn't automate, but it allows you to kind of do this authoring and mundane tasks. These are some of the mundane tasks that people hate, right?
Yeah, even products like ServiceNow have added GRC modules to
Mhm.
them that support this kind of thing.
Exacta as well. But yep.
Let me ask you another question, like with these poems and
So,
stuff. Do you have
so
to
if you don't mind, let's finish this. Please
I'm
just
sorry.
itemize the questions. No, totally okay. Let's itemize the questions. It's because of time. Let's hit all of these to make sure people follow, and then we will come back to all the questions, okay?
Okay.
Sure, did the poem was changed? Let's say we have already procured this, the vendor, right? Like tool from the vendor, and we have marked this as, okay, we have achieved this milestone. When did we do that? Because the poem was changed. Provide the risk rating from the scanner. We don't have a scanner, but maybe having this risk in place is really high, then we'll identify it as a high risk, right? What's the adjusted risk? So assuming we have closed this and whatsoever, but what is the adjusted risk approved by either the CIO or the CISO or whatever? It should just be by some senior management, right? Maybe now it's no longer a high, it has switched to a moderate risk because we're able to remediate it. Or even if we remediate it completely, then we are closing it, right? But it's still open and we have procure and deploy the tool, but we are yet to test it and remediate, but we have already deployed, then maybe it's now back to low, right? Whether this weakness should be considered false positive. No, it is not, but is it, if it's a false positive, let's say from a tool where the tool is reporting it as an error, but it's not really an error, we can just mark it as yes. Whether this weakness should be considered an operational requirement. Operational requirements are those requirements and controls that kind of push the business forward in terms of if this is if this is not in place or if this failed, the system is not operational, right? So let's give an example. Let's say you forget the system doesn't connect to the internet and it's meant to be connecting to the internet for you to be able to do certain tasks online, right? If the system's weakness is maybe the network interface card has failed, it means the system cannot connect to the internet. And then because of that, it's considered an operational requirement because the system is not doing what it's meant to do, right? So I'm just going to mark this as no. Keep in mind, I believe my poem requirements is just for you to kind of come up with something. I might just toss a question to you like, hey, so can you tell me why you decide to say this as no? And I will want you to explain just like I did right now. What's the status of this poem? I'll leave it as open. It actually, I will say in progress because we have already procured the tool, right? Any additional comments? Yeah, I will just say any comment basically, right? Related to this. This weakness or finding, I will just say this finding is awaiting CIO's approval, maybe something like that, right? To be closed, something like that. That's what it is. This is the poem, okay?
So Professor, I have a question.
Go for
This is a particular format, obviously, for a poem
it.
under the RMF.
Mhm.
Are there different possible formats that one could use? And is that something that ends up being prescribed in the agency's specific guidelines, like the ones that you were showing earlier?
Correct. Every agency at the agency level will have their own type of template. And yeah, every agency tends to have their own template. There is no one size fits all. There is no generic template for everybody. The only place you will see generic templates is like you will see DoD because they have this generic guidelines from like the RMF, but even there they are changing it a lot. Or you go to like say FedRAMP because there is one template that all CSPs must fill because that's what FedRAMP understands. Other than that, every agency.
Thank you.
Sure thing. So we'll get into the SAW, right? What is the SAW as we discussed? By the way, this is a bit off, but the SAW, actually there is a different template for SAW. I don't know what's going on here. But the SAW is just meant to provide you with the control, the status, and additional recommendations. Let me look into the template for SAW, or we might end up just waiving it as a requirement because this is not a template for SAW. I'm not sure what happened, but the SAW will look at each single control like this based on the assessment and say, okay, the status, like compliance status, for example, and it will say, okay, this is in compliance, right? Do not mistaken this with the implementation status. Implementation status will say the system is implemented. No, sorry, the control is implemented or it is not implemented, but the compliance status is around the control is in compliance or it is not in compliance, right? Sorry, not in compliance, or it could be other terminologies like passed or failed, right? So all of these. Now, all of these failed, ideally, are what will get populated into this poem. They will just, so these two that we identified as failed, like these two, that's AC1, AC21 and AC22, will be the things that get transferred into this, and then we will document why each single thing failed. But as I mentioned earlier, do not be surprised to see your agency is not focusing on this, the ones that failed here, but rather it's focusing on what is the outcome from NESAS or what inspect to generate it here.
Professor, if I may ask, that other workbook that you're showing, or maybe it's another worksheet in the same workbook,
Yeah.
it looks kind of like the contents of 853B.
Yep, absolutely correct. And
Okay.
that's why I'm saying this is not necessarily the template.
What an incredible hustle play. They shut
That, can everybody please go on mute? This is not necessarily the template for SAR. I will look into what happened, but we will provide you with the right template for SAR. And then at the same time, the content of SAR is just the compliance status and the recommendation and the overall recommendation on whether the system should be approved or not. While you might not see these in the SAR, these columns, you should at least see just this that identifies the different controls. Maybe this will be getting rid of as well. If you are to use as this, so this could be part of the compliance status document that shows what controls were passed and filled, the recommendation, and then you can find an overall recommendation section. Let's do this high level. Insert. I think I'm just going to waive the requirements for you to build a SAR because we do not provide. Then you can find another overall recommendation, obviously with the name of the assessor and things like that, where the overall recommendation is more focused on should the system be authorized or not, right? And this is why you'll say, yep, authorize or do not authorize again. But this is a recommendation to who? The AO. Over here, overall recommendation to say AO, right? This is another part of the SAR. We will look for the template, but we might end up just waiving the SAR requirements because this time, at this stage, trying to have you go through it might be confusing. Absolutely, we'll go over the SAR. Okay, now I'm going to.
Are you waiving this section or not? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because I
That's
didn't get
what I'm saying, that I'm going to send an email and let everybody know if it is waived or not.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Now, based on that, we will also we touch upon what? The ISCM, the Information System Continuous Monitoring, right? which is, give me just a second. Trying to get it. Okay. Nope, this is the contingency plan. I'm not sure what's going on. Huh. Okay, yeah. So this shouldn't be the SSP, but yeah, we'll update this. You will have this, you will find that it's mostly just content around it, but ideally it should capture the primary side, alternate side. You shouldn't worry about this, but it's more related to data centers. I'm concerned about these templates. Give me please just a second. Let me look into which templates am I really pulling from this system, because ideally it shouldn't be. I'm not sure how I didn't come prepared for this. Give me just a second, okay? The ATO templates. And are these the same type of templates you're seeing online, like that we attach in the class? Anyone?
Yep.
Yes, they're the templates on the modules.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get them definitely updated, but at the same time, I am about to pull an ISCM template for you to see. Information system, not the contingency plan, but the ISCM. Okay, but I also have the SSP template here. Interesting. Give me a second. Okay, great. So here we'll have an SSP document that you will also fill out. Same approach, I believe over here, everybody knows it. The information system name and title. Same information from your categorization that you did, you're going to put there. That is the first document. Everybody must remember this. Again, the SSP is going to be an overarching document relating to different documentations, right? Put the information system owner, you identify the authorizing official, the leverage authorizations, if any, the minimum security controls. So this is quite important. On my part, there is the SC8, which I did. And what is the control description? It's protect information at rest, okay? What is the sensitivity level? You can ignore this part, truthfully, because no, so sorry. My system was a high system. SC8 was at the, this, but you can populate this straight from NIST. I want you, in this summary, you have the controls that are common, all the controls that you identify, not just the ones that you implemented, should be listed here. Does that make sense?
Can you say that one more time?
All the controls that you have identified related to your system, not the scoping, but the controls that are, there will be a total of around 10. One that you implemented, and then you will have the common controls, the inherited and the hybrid that we discussed about, right? I want to see them listed here as well.
Got it.
Cool. So based on that, remember we had a section in step 2 where you implemented your system. Let's use this and say this is SC28, really similar to mine, right? That I did. Did I implement, who was the responsible role? I will go with Marymount University because nope, not the responsible role. I am the, I will say, security engineer that did that, right? The parameter, you can skip those parts. Implementation status, did I implement it? Absolutely yes. So put a check mark here, right? What is the control origination? This do not apply to you because it's more FedRAMP template this, but yours will be, is it system specific? Actually, we have it as the second level. Hold on. We have it service provider system specific, so select it, right? What is the solution and how was it implemented? On mine, there's no part B and part C, there's only part A. So what is the solution? We implemented just the same implementation statement you wrote in the spreadsheet. I'm fine with it being here. We implemented this control using JavaScript to achieve all of those things that we talk about, right? Like it will include things like AES 256. It will include all of those things that you implemented. Does that make sense? Then the attachments. This will contain all of the deliverables that we identify in the class that are you are submitted as part of your ATO package. So it will include the FIPS 199 document. What is the attachment? Maybe the name of the attachment is FIPS 199 document. What's the file name? This should be capitalized. FIPS 199 system categorization document. What is the file name? Maybe you named it same thing, maybe, depending on whatever it is you did, right? Uh-oh, give me a second. And what's the file extension? If you saved it in PDF, I think we have a clear requirement in the class, right? On what the file extension should be. That's the end of the SSP. After that, we have the last item, which is the main thing. The ATO memo. It's one page. You are going to put the date, who is the system owner that you're addressing it to, inside the address, the system owner name, and put all of these information, and ideally put the system name, like mine is Marimon Learning Management System, put the system name, put either, hold on. Yep, you can put an X if your system meets the information security requirement, that is the requirements of the class. Or, well, if you say it does not, definitely you get filling that, right? I am the one to fill, actually no, I am the one to fill this. That is whether if your system is granted or it is not granted at ATO, and I will sign this. Yours is just to change everything that is in red. That's it. And I'll sign this and return it back to you. Fill out your system name. And that's it in terms of the ATO memo. Most times, the way you just see this one pager, the wording might not be exactly the same, but just this one pager document is exactly what an AO gets, and they sign, and then the system is authorized.